I think a lot of the security debate in signage at large is about defamation, right? That's what people jump to mind. Like they're just like, oh, they can show porn on our screens. Okay, yeah, that's bad. That's a PR disaster. I get that. That's yeah, it's definitely tangible that people can envision. But that's not the real damage. The real damage is the silent attack, right? Where they use the signage player because it's running eval Android or Windows, whatever, jump on their network and start siphoning off data, right? That's where the people should be really scared of, right? And that's like there are mitigation strategies for that, like you can VLAN and so whatnot. But that I think that's something that we need to talk more about as an actual real implication. And I was at DEF CON this year, and one of the talks there was from the securities company Sophos, and they described this exact scenario where somebody's entire cloud infrastructure got owned because they were able to jump on a signage player, compromise that, which in turn had overprivileged access to their cloud infra.
Hey everybody, this is Daniel here, joined here with Viktor, the co-founder of Screenly, and Deacon Wardlow, coming to us from Vantage Media. So we're really excited to be jumping into another episode of the Screenly Changelog. This is episode 15 already, and coming in fresh from our live episode in Phuket, Thailand, and we're all back at our home bases and hit the ground running. So we have an exciting episode for everyone today. I'm here with Deacon Wardlow from Vantage LED. We'll be covering all the hot topics in digital signage, and let's jump into it. So Deacon, we of course have met online, but never, I guess, in video online. So pleasure to meet you. For those in the audience who are also, perhaps for the first time meeting you. Well, actually, how about this? How did you and Viktor get to know each other? How did you guys meet?
Well, I was browsing. I think it was LinkedIn or something. I saw a post about Screenly, at one of the shows. I think it might have been Infocom, DSE, something like that.
We're at a bunch of them, so.
Yeah, and you had this little thing here about, hey, send us a note and we'll send you a bit lock, a little charge locker, right? And
nice.
I just, I always like to see what people do for swag, and I already have like my own this is for security stuff, the little power blockers. I like the transparent one because you can see that it actually only takes from the power feed. I'm not trying to trick you.
All right.
But
we may or may not be actually encoding all the devices.
Right.
Yeah. But
might be
I like the idea. And when I got the post, Viktor had reached out and said like, hey, let's chat about, what you guys are doing. And I'm always open to learning more about what other people are doing, especially in digital signage. So we got online and we just had a great conversation for an hour, just talking about everything,
amazing,
security and all that. Yeah, because in my background, it's been about 30 years. Back going to high school, working with computers and coding and elements on that, and then zoom forward to Spectacular Media, which 13 years ago started, we developed Cloudware specifically for digital outdoor LED displays, like the big systems, and Vantage LED, which makes the LED displays for outdoor and indoor. And then I've got a consulting firm, which is Simply, and that kind of runs a spectrum of anything and everything, usually technological.
Hell yeah, nice. Well, Viktor,
going back to the original AI.
Viktor, props to you. The USB blocker worked. I remember when we were getting ready for some of these shows. We're like, yeah, we got to do more than pens, and people are over that. Like, let's do something unique, and let's get a card, and let's get it made, and let's make it kind of retro and cool. And here we are. So
yeah,
nice one.
Indeed. Yeah. One thing I kind of wanted to start kicking things off with, Deacon, is kind of like what we spoke about last. Like, I kind of want to start with talking about like how is out of home different from regular signage, right? Because these are very different devices, and you guys have worked with them for a while. I kind of want to start the conversation there. Like, you've been in this field for a while. You work with regular signage, but you also with out of home. Talk to me about like the complexity of that and how how it's different. I think that might be a good starting point, really.
I think it's interesting because I got into the signage aspect about 20 years ago when I came back to the States from Japan, and we were working on a lot of different aspects, and because of my technical background, they did the company I was with at the time, Barlow Signs, did a lot of digital outdoor for everyone from churches to NASCAR. So there was a large, plethora, and at the time there were a lot of different companies doing that stuff. And the signage is interesting because it has so many custom aspects of technical integration. So like when I got into it in 2006, nobody did color changing LEDs, for example. They were available, but only if you went to China. So I went to China, and I remember there were no control systems really set for it unless you were buying from Color Kinetics. So I was like, hey, I can use a Chauvet Obey, like those 10-channel DJ mixers for lighting. And I was like, I can pre-program all the stuff in and just tell the customer to press that button for, this day. So it was very, it was interesting because the early days and even digital signage, that's kind of how it felt. You kind of felt like you were MacGyvering things all the time, like a little duct tape here, a little something there. And even with going into digital signage, a lot of companies were looking at elements like their menu boards in a supermarket or a restaurant that had they hadn't settled on their menu, and they were tired of like constantly putting up more like butcher paper or something. So these are the early integrations, the early days of what people are going through, right? And e-ink has just started out, like they were a new company, and no one really knew what you could do with that outside of like maybe a Kindle type of reader, the ebooks and stuff. But so everyone was kind of putting together weird confabs of things. And the commercial grade displays were, of course, available at the time, but they're expensive now, but they were really expensive then. I remember someone asking me about in 2008, it was a park or something wanted to do kiosks, and no one had really done kiosks. So they're like, well, what do we need to do? I was like, well, there's no displays that are built for outdoor really for your use. So we'd have to build an enclosure, and now you have to think about AC and what's the control situation. People were still like, we were buying and building tower computers, like small form factor to run the LED displays outdoor and putting them in NEMA 4 enclosures. And it was just, it was crazy because there was no real software and smaller control system integration for outdoor stuff, right? So it was constantly like that bridge between the static sign world and the digital one is one where people want to make that leap, but it felt like that there's this huge information gap, and there's still sort of that now, right? Like I was just talking to Victor before we jumped on about someone was asking me about recommendations for what type of digital signage TVs, right? LCD, LED, OLED, whatever, for an integration. So it's like, well, I haven't looked at LEDs for a little bit, so I'm just going to do a refresh. And, so I jumped to Reddit, and then I'm looking at all these screens recommendations. People are like, well, just go to like, Best Buy or Costco, dude. Just put them all up. And I'm like, I mean, it can work. It depends on your. Are you like a small dive bar that just wants your screen's going to get broken every week?
Yeah, well, especially with the outdoor stuff too. I mean, there's so many considerations with like, I mean, you mentioned the AC, so there's not just heat, but there's also humidity issues. There's like sunlight issues with, first of all the electronics, but also just the customer being able to view it, and brightness issues. And do you find now, I mean, versus in 2006, you mentioned when you are going with a new installation, is the is there a more educated customer base, or is it still kind of the same thing of like, hey, we just need a sign, can't you just plug it in? Like, has that changed at all?
It depends, right? Like, digital signage is still the land of integrators. I want to say, like, sign companies are getting into it more, but it's the technology side makes them a little nervous, because these are like sign companies, for example, are more like general contractors, construction, right? But they're the custom ones. So like, you want letters to look like this, and you want your sign to look like this, so they can build the whole physical sign with the steel and the plastic and all the other stuff that goes into it. But when you add that extra layer of programming, and then now you need fiber optic, or you need, HDMI cable, all this technical type of element, a lot of them aren't integrators, so it makes them nervous. And while it's interesting, there's more information. It's like there's a glut of information. It's almost too much. So when people go online, they get all this different sources, and you're never really sure who to trust, right? And so increasingly, people are turning to augmented intelligence, right? Like ChatGPT or something else. And,
I'm sure that's great for one-off signage projects.
And
it gives you the step-by-step, but it's like, okay, something's missing. Yeah.
Well, I posted this thing once just out of curiosity. I at the early days, right? Or early days being COVID time, 2020 or whatever. And I was like, okay, like, do a step-by-step guide for a digital signage installation. And it got like the first 4 pictures kind of right. Like, here's the setup, and here's running the cable, and here's putting the thing on. And then when it mounts the display, it had backwards. Like, it's like somehow put the face on the mount, so the back was accessible. Like, okay, well, it gets it and it doesn't. And it reminded me of like customers too, because it's the same deal. They know what they want to achieve, but it's still that nebulous world where they don't know the costs, and they don't know all the other things. Like you're saying, even at the most basic level, like I warn people, you can go to Sam's Club or you can go to Costco, but recognize that when you put that screen up in your store, you just voided the warranty. And it's not, if you try to take a TV that's 55 inches and put it in portrait mode, right? You can do that, but it's not built to handle the heat operations that long in that form,
But that's a great point that I don't think most people realize, right? Because obviously a TV is designed, a consumer TV is designed to be in landscape mode. And if you look at it, you see how the fans are positioned for that particular reason. Rotate it, the heat will still go up, but there is no opening on that side, right? So that's kind of an interesting observation that I don't think a lot of people have thought about.
That's one thing too. I mean, for a while we've experienced with some of these projects, and especially when you're getting into like the longer term life cycle issues, it's this kind of like mentality too, where signage, I think the normal consumer's perspective is that it's like a one and done thing, where okay, we got it, we paid for it, it's done, like on to the next thing. And that's just really never the case, right? It's never the case in terms of, I mean, okay, like it's something we do at Screenly, but like the software lifecycle, right? Like those updates need to happen somehow, and if they're ignored, there's issues. There are similar topics from just like the content management side, right? I mean, if you get a big fancy sign installation, but it's not showing anything that's useful or interesting, it's like, okay, that's a waste. And then it kind of puts everyone in this like weird area where no one's really sure who's responsible, right? So it's like the company, they start leaning on the integrators, saying, okay, well, like this and that, and you're kind of nice for a little bit, and then it's like, hey, this is like way out of scope, we did not get paid for this, we got to talk. Or it just kind of falls on some employee who doesn't really know and is kind of figuring out as they go, and then it's eating into their other responsibilities. Or the worst case, I think, is when it just kind of gets ignored, and it's like, okay, one of the extra problems for the day, and we'll get to it when we get to it. So have how have you kind of managed that in some of the installations you've been, advising on in terms of, seeing things from beyond just the first step installation, and then having that conversation with the customer where it's like, hey, there are a lot more components if you're thinking about doing this right in the long term.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we realized really quickly was the content management side, right? Like people, especially for digital outdoor, for LED displays, because the resolution is not, 1080 or 4K. Yes. It's like a web banner. It's
right. Yeah. You cannot download from Canva.
By 10 feet. Yeah. And you can actually use Canva, but yeah, most of them, surprisingly, a lot of the systems are very limited. Like they only allow for 6 or 7 file types, right? And so that was one thing we immediately addressed, because it's just codecs. It's just like one of our clients wanted to take a Samsung phone and do video and then throw it right on the screen. We're like, well, you're gonna have scaling issues, but then it's 3GP. It's this weird codec. So we're like, okay, we'll do it, but just understand it might not look great. And so we actually added design services for a year for all the clients who buy our systems, just to help them get past that point. Because we're like, well, our designers can make it look good, and they've got more time to free that up. But I found beyond it, it's like you said, they have this, the client has this idea, like, we want to have this for this purpose, but they don't think beyond the actual installation integration when it's running. And exactly like you said, like they think of the first bits of content they want, but they don't realize, like, well, you've got to keep changing this, right? You got to keep updating it. You got to have a point of contact. Someone's going to have to take, responsibility for this. If you've got a rollout nationally of 100 or 1,000 sites, or even just 10, how is this going to integrate in your location? We had this one problem with a rollout for a national client, and they have these, they have the office, and the systems were all plugged into their network at the office. It was just a little router that had like 2 network ports. So a manager would come in, and they're like, I don't know what this is. And they'd unplug the display, the network port for the display, and plug in their laptop so they could like play online or check Facebook or something. And we were like, why are all these systems going offline?
That's hilarious.
We're like, maybe you want cellular for your stuff, or something that's not on your network, or maybe a way to lock it in. And we even saw this with some quick service restaurants, fast food places, where the employee would go in the back for a smoke break or something, and they'd be like, I want to plug in my phone to a power adapter. Like, I don't know what this is. So they unplug it. Like, no one's yelling. So suddenly people are like, how come our stuff is our screens just went black?
That's funny. Yeah. I think that adopted, ease of adoption for, the moments post installation is really important too, because, the truth is, like, the person who is the real, like, they have the idea for signage. We need signage for this quick service restaurant. In many cases, they're really not the person who is doing the day-to-day thereafter. Maybe it's like a school district, right? And like the people who have that information on the content that they want sometimes see signs as like not their territory, right? Or something that they can't really have influence over. But once you break that boundary where it's like, hey, if you want something up there because you have some event coming up, like, just tell us, like, you can influence this. That's when you get the real stickiness, where everyone wants something on their sign. They know that they can change it. They know it's not some like obscure process with IT that they don't want to deal with. And if you don't get that early adoptability, it kind of just stays static forever. So, yeah.
I wanted to zoom in on one thing, which I think is important. Like, I have very limited exposure to like out-of-home screens. In a previous life, I have touched them a few times, and my experience, like, a lot of them are just like, at least the ones you rent for events and whatnot, which is the exposure that I've had. They just come with this PC, oftentimes running an end-of-life Windows with some piece of software from China, and that's like the management ability of this, right? And what you see often them is then like you see like, oh, team viewer installed, and that's like, oh, now you have like manageability of that. Like that was my experience like 15 some years ago for this. And like, has this moved on, or is it still like, generally speaking, the state of that industry still? Because like it's very different than the signage that we are used to at Screenly, at like where's like it's like 1084K or whatnot, and then that's a very different experience. Like walk me through like what's this left land today?
Yeah, I think out of home it's interesting because it's got a lot of different scales, right? Like if you're talking primarily out of home, like advertising, right, and everything from the sidewalk furniture that you see at like bus stops and everything to large scale billboards, whether they're like the postcards, like the 10-foot by 16-foot or the larger. It's a depends on the manufacturer, right? So a lot of manufacturers now have their own proprietary cloudware usually. So a lot of it says, and for scaled out of home, often real estate for out of home is multiple displays, right? So they think less about CMS, the content management system, and more about billing. So their systems are usually built around service level agreements with redundancies, and they take the asset from the client. Sometimes they'll make it themselves, and then they run the layer that basically manages and maintains and monitors those systems to make sure that, like, you know, this soda brand was up 98% of the time, which is the service level agreement, and it definitely ran at these times in the day, this many runs per hour, per day, whatever. And the back end, though, the actual system itself, you're right, it's either proprietary by a company here in the States, or more often than not, I see a lot of Chinese displays, which in even 6 years ago or 5 years ago was interesting when they started pushing cloudware, right? Because what would happen is all these displays were running totally fine. And then people were reminded that they got something from China when the Great Firewall went up. And suddenly all the displays were dead for like 2 weeks because someone in China just decided, we're not going to let all this traffic's flowing in and out of, you know, Guangzhou or Shenzhen or something else. We're just turn off the switch, firewall up, and then no one could communicate with their product, their displays, and they're like, oh, this is a problem. So, you know, I saw an advent of a lot of like second layer systems. So the Chinese systems would run the system itself, like configurations and stuff. And then this other layer basically managed the players and made sure that like content was running at least locally, if not, you know, on the cloud. So it's interesting to see those integrations. It's another thing too, where like you're saying, it's too much information, right? Like people go on, and they're like, oh, well, out of home displays, that must be a commoditized product because it's been out for decades now. I'm like, well, no, they're not, because they're not all the same, because there are no standards. You know, at least for small screens, there are some standards for power, for performance, and then, like you said, 1080, 720, 4K, whatever, right? Like you've got resolutions. But for large format, specifically LED systems, it's kind of still very much dependent on who you're getting it from. And people go online, they're like, I can buy this thing for $2,000. I'm like,
yeah, I mean, I mean, we've had customers reaching out to us at Screenly. So we have, and we still are using customers who are using video walls, kind of like for running these. But in many cases, like there are a few things that makes these very different than TVs, right? Because like first of all, like they are oftentimes bought in like bricks, right? So you can put them together in these blocks, right? So you can design like whatever ratio you want and so forth, right? And the second thing that makes them very different is that more often than not, they don't have like an HDMI in. Like it's not driven by HDMI, it's driven by control software, which is the one you were referring to. So you can't use a traditional CMS for the signage part of it. Like some do, but then you have scale issues and a lot of other, like scaling down 1080 to like something that's like a few hundred pixels. Like it's not great. But maybe walk through that, because I think for people watching, they may not understand quite how that world works, because I think it's very easy to think that it's similar to regular signage, but it's very far from in most ways.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, you've got the modules that are these like little LED modules with the louvers and protection, whatever, and then you've got your neoprene seals and everything else that goes into it. So and that runs the gamut too, because you've got dip, dual inline package, which are the oval LEDs everyone thinks about. Now you've got surface mount diodes too, and then beyond that, you go interior, and you've got chip on board and like glue on board, and it starts to get like a chip on glass, and then you've got even in DV LED, direct view LEDs, usually for interior. You've got micro LEDs even. So those screens, and that's interesting, because it's becoming a bridge between the traditional digital signage space with the traditional LCD LED. And micro LEDs, as it become more affordable, I think you're going to see more of that integration, to the point where it's just scale, right? Do you want one of these that's 55 inch, or do you need something that's 10 foot high, or bigger? And that integration just on the physical hardware side is something that a lot of people don't think about, except I do see more commercial companies thinking about their video walls. So you see video walls switching out from what used to be like 36 inch or 55 inch screens with all of the mounts and all that. And like, let's just make this LED, because LED is going to be easier. It's going to be lower power. It's going to be less to manage, right? But then that's a more educated buyer, right? Because they've gone through the pains of like what it means to integrate and gamma correct and all the other physical problems you have with that hardware. But the newer buyers, let's say, right, they're getting into it, and like you said, they don't think about scale. They have no idea of price, because you don't know what a price is for something like this. So you go and you think about what's relatable, and you think again, Costco or Best Buy. Screen. Well, I saw a 4K screen for like $800, and that thing was like 3 foot by 6 foot wide. I mean, it was a pretty big screen. So LED's got to be like what, like 1,600? I'm like, no, way more. And because they don't think about, against even the commercial grade stuff, like the difference between consumer grade TVs and commercial grade TVs. Then it's the LEDs and all of the stuff that goes in the back end, the logic boards and the DVI boards and the controllers. And that's not even thinking about security and performance, like what you're talking about on that side too. Like that's a whole other level that even integrators often shy away from, because they just don't. A lot of people want to sell it, set it, and walk away. And that after integration, it's often left out of the equation. And you think about like, well, what's running my system? I see people who are, and it's fine. They're running from something from Google, or they're running something online from some other company that just pushes the image to their screen, regardless of what screen type that is. And then like I woke up on Monday, and 3 or 4 of my home applications were like, this failed, this service failed, this operator failed. I'm like, why is it all failing? And then I read about AWS going down. I'm like, oh, okay, well, now I know who's using Amazon Web Services.
Well, yeah, it's funny. It feels like that Tintin meme, like, what a week. Captain, it's only Wednesday. It feels like we're already there, but it's just Tuesday today. But like, yeah, it is. Let's pause for a moment to speak about that, because I think that's something that the AWS outage has impacted all our lives in ways we might have even anticipated. Right? I mean, I couldn't turn off my home alarm system because my alarm got fired off, because it's on a schedule normally, and it fired. And I couldn't open the app because I couldn't turn it off. Like, that's it is it has vast implications to that. And yeah, I'm sure you guys have some battle stories about things that impacted your life there as well for AWS Tuesday.
Wasn't the Louvre heist also at the same time?
It was.
I think.
I wonder
was
if there's any.
I don't think they were.
Have you found the culprit?
I don't think it was really late. It was what's that? It's I can't believe it's when something is.
It was on a Monday, right? Like it was on Monday Paris time morning.
Maybe the alarm system for Louvre was running in US East 1.
I mean,
correlation versus causation.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't think that the perpetrators like would be able to coordinate that, but I wonder if their like crazy success had, I don't know, like maybe like I would be surprised if it impacted zero, right? Like maybe it was at like the police level where they had something that worked less, you know. I mean, because they still haven't found the guys, right? Like it's.
I kid you not, like my alarm for my home office triggered because I couldn't turn it off. Yeah. I had to then call off the dispatch service, and I was on hold due to like severe extended wait times.
Yeah,
presumably because of other similar situations.
Yeah, well, that's
maybe we found them, Danielle. Maybe we found the people behind.
I don't know. I'm sure there'll be something that comes out.
People at Amazon.
That it's like, okay, yeah, the attack wasn't like waiting for an AWS outage, but like there must have been something it touched in the next 24 hours that like diddled with something a little bit. So
like domino effects, right?
Yeah, something like that. That some story that would get bought by the Washington Post and never get out. So, anyways.
So you kind of hit the keyword for one of the key topics that we talk about on the podcast a lot, which is security or rather the lack of security in the world of IoT and signage. We've covered at length before. We talked about various things we've seen. I'm really curious about what have you seen in the world of out of home, because I think it is worse than in signage in many ways. But I'm curious what you've seen. Obviously, you're a security nerd like myself, so I'm curious as to what you've seen over and war stories you've seen, kind of over your tenure in this industry.
It's interesting because you've got the gamut, right? Like from really simplistic, we'll call it like roadside signage for construction and such, and those companies literally because of they build the systems for general use. So they've got to be able to not have to be online, not have all this stuff, because it's a system that sits on the road, often solar powered, by a construction crew that needs to be able to put a message on there quickly right there, you know, because they're suddenly this lane is blocked or something else going on or zombies are attacking. And you see the zombie attacks because it's so simple that basically the hack is to break the master lock. And which you can do with
30 seconds of lockpicking essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can put whatever you want. So you've got that level of access up to the more secured systems that are using cloudware or something else, right? And ideally have lockouts like hardware lockouts. So even when someone gets physical access to it, unless they know the access codes or the way to get beyond the lockout, then they're still stuck, right? But then, like you said, you've got all these systems that are China-based. And unfortunately, a lot of those systems, the access is as easy as looking up, okay, well, which company did this come from in China? Well, look at that. You can download the software and you can get access to it. And it's like, you go to Wi-Fi places in a new business and their router is still admin. So you suddenly have control of their wireless, and because the business just hasn't had a chance to get around to that. Like you said, they're so busy thinking of everything else, they don't think about that. And
we found in Phuket, Thailand, that they actually never get around to that ever. So it was honestly just this running joke that the password to almost anything was either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 1 through 9. Like it was one or the other. And
that was the Wi-Fi password, like almost everywhere.
Yeah,
like laughably like frequent.
So no need to pay for data if you're on your way to Thailand. So
especially Phuket.
Yeah.
It's not the thing that's present in mind, right, in front of mind, and people don't often think about like, well, what are the risks on it? And you see something like, I've seen more security at an elementary school for their sign applications than I've seen at like a dentist office. So a dentist puts in this screen and they just want to, run some stuff. So maybe they have a really simple multi-layer. So they've got the live feed with their own surround on services that they're putting in, right? And so they just want a simple thing that just puts that layer on, and they get let's say an Android stick, right, base system, and they throw it in, and then boom, now you've got a problem with, well, what's the Android running? And Linux is secure, right, up until a certain point if it's not updated, like any hardware, any software, any OS. And someone somewhere is going to be like, hey, that little stick that's connected to their office on their network, and there's no other network connection because it's all secured. So someone decides to pop something on there, and now you've got credit cards, Social Security, you've got HIPAA information, and it's a back end, right? It piggybacks through the system, and that's the security hole that a lot of people don't think about.
But I think that's such an important point to drive home, because I think a lot of the security debate in signage at large is about defamation, right? That's what people jump to mind. Like they're just like, oh, they can show porn on our screens. Okay, yeah, that's bad. That's a PR disaster. I get that. That's yeah, it's definitely tangible that people can envision. But that's not the real damage. The real damage is a silent attack, right? Where they use the signage player because it's running EWL Android or Windows, whatever, jump on their network and start siphoning off data, right? That's where the people should be really scared of, right? And that's like, there are mitigation strategies for that, like you can access VLANs and whatnot, but I think that's something that we need to talk more about as an actual real implication. And I was at DEF CON this year, and one of the talks there was from the securities company Sophos, and they described this exact scenario where somebody's entire cloud infrastructure got owned because they were able to jump on a signage player, compromise that, which in turn had overprivileged access to their cloud infra, jump to that, voila, now they pawned an entire cloud infra just because one signage player was A, unpatched, B, had over access in terms of permission structure, right? But I think these are the ones we need to talk about. Like we need to move into sophistication from, oh no, showing porn is bad. Yes, it is, but it's a PR headache, not a game over scenario for the company, right?
And it's even the attacks they're insidious in nature, because it's not always, I want to get onto the system to get your information, get your client's information and stuff, because increasingly because of PCI, like credit card security requirements, right? That's at least helping some of that. Then you've got other cards like Apple Pay, right, and Google Wallet that secure the data with two-factor authentication and other means. But I've noticed that the people then are grabbing all these open assets, and then they're making lists on the dark web. And they're like, hey, do you need to run some Bitcoin mining? Do you want to have some zombie players? Do you want your next spam attack to come from 30 different sites? All that. And so now all these become assets for however someone wants to pawn something, right? Basically they can do everything from the more insidious quiet attacks to that question I have, like, well, okay, so you haven't had any problems with your network and with your systems and all that. That's a good time to run a lot of checks on your system. If your security hasn't been updated, other stuff, it could just be sitting there like it's an asset that hasn't been activated yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like persistent attack structures, like persistent vectors, right? Well, I mean, what have you seen? Like, what's your worst horror story? What have you seen in the industry in terms of like blatantly bad security?
I found out in the early days of Signage, right? Like the general contractor type of reality. Anyone with a hard hat and a clipboard can go almost anywhere, right?
Social engineering 101, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember walking into a bank once, and I had a clipboard because I needed to check off some stuff and get information. And I was like, yeah, I need access to your network cabinet, and I've got to check the systems because we're having a connectivity problem. And your marketing agent just asked us to stop by, and I'm expecting, okay, well, wait, I need to make a call, or wait, I need authentication, or you have to go into the minute, or we're going to call IT to verify. They're like, oh, yeah, it's right over here. Like, you just gave me access to your network closet for a bank.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's a good thing I'm a good person. And of course before that I'm like, can you do this for me? Can you call your IT and just let them know I am at the location, and because I'm going to need their assistance anyway, because I don't know where their DMZ port is, all that other stuff.
Right.
But I'm just thinking, like, this person just didn't know any better, and they were just trying to do their job. And they're like, oh, just go ahead. And I mean, that's one of the worst. But I have seen other systems. I remember where I was walking into a site, and this is 10 years ago, and I remember the computer was locked out because that's how they access their out-of-home systems. All their digital signage was run from a tower, a computer in an office. And I was like, oh, this is great. And the person quit, and they changed the password. Right. So she was like, well, I can't, I guess we're just gonna have to buy a new thing or something, right? I'm like, no, I've got this USB that she's like, what are you using there? I'm like, oh, it's Heron's. She's like, what's Heron's? So I'm like, oh, I don't think I want to tell you that. But I mean, it's that thing where I was telling someone, like, even the best security, if you have physical access, it's done. I mean, even the lowest form of hacker if they can have actual physical access to something, you can do anything at that point. And a good hacker can do a lot of things. But with so many systems online, and that they're even, it's not just that they're online, but they're actively shouting, hey, here I am, right? Because the way that player was set up was like, hey, okay, when you go online, I need you to let me know that you're online. So I need you to send out a signal. And it's, people aren't thinking, they're thinking, oh, it's like point to point, right? It's like this to this IP, this address. I'm like, well, it has to travel along a whole bunch of other lines, and someone somewhere is waiting for that signal to be like, hey, this just came online. Great.
Well,
I'm going to check that out. Yeah.
Well, even worse, that people think, like, well, technically speaking, the IPv4 internet is a vast place, but it's not. Like, you can scan the entire internet very quickly today with modern scanners. And if you go on service like Shodan, you can just say, hey, give me all the devices, because they scan the entire internet. It's like, give me all the devices that have an open VNC port, right? Or whatever it might be. And there was a thing a few years ago, maybe you remember, called VNC Roulette, where you literally just, like, it was a web interface, you could, like, literally, like, jump through all the public VNC. And some of them were, like, control systems for, like, I think the worst one they saw was like a control system for, like, a power plant, like completely open to the internet without any security, right? And it's just like, this kind of what I was alluding to before with how a lot of these systems are remotely managed. And unfortunately, even if that's a billboard, might have like a 4G modem or a 5G modem and whatnot, but then they plug that in and then they just, like, put TeamViewer on there or like VNC on there, and maybe if they're good, they put a password on it, right? But that's unfortunately the state of much of security. And like, have you seen a lot of that? Is that, am I making that up? Is that, like, what's the reality of that today? Because I'm curious, like, what the state of that is.
Yeah, I see a lot of it, and it's like what you're saying, like everything from the friendly hack sites that have those IP, the camera roulettes and all that, and you go on. Sometimes you'll see someone's baby monitor or whatever, right? Yeah. But then other times you're like, oh, this is someone's home camera setup. Why is this all accessible? And because they just hit a setting they didn't really think about, right? And or they had an integrator who who didn't check all the boxes. And sometimes it's as simple as that. It's not even like the system itself. You can have the most secure system in the world. But if you leave your doors unlocked and you don't, turn it on, how is it going to really help you? Kind of deal, right?
Do you find projects coming to you with this like in foresight, saying, well, hey, what are the checks here for security, or is it still more of a retrospective approach where, hey, we had this problem, now we need to start thinking about security?
I think it's retrospective because unfortunately, a lot of clients don't have the wherewithal to have someone who's technically capable, right?
Yeah.
And even now, back in the day when I got into network stuff, like network security, got my A+ and all the things that you had to get, to get an IT job, I had met many times a person who was the IT manager for a college. And I was like, well, where'd you go to school? Where'd you get your security credentials? Did you take the ethics courses? And they're like, no, I Google really well. They're like, I was actually the secretary, but I knew computers pretty okay. And I learned, how to handle, Active Domain and Active Directory. And I started like taking online stuff, and the school's like, okay, great. And then they kind of like organically moved into that position, which is fine. I think there are a lot of people that they deserve that right because they earn it and they go in. But the concern is, without someone who's more actively thinking, okay, I know this stuff, what do I not know? And then that's where you bring in a consultant, or that's where you bring in the integrator, or at least you ask the questions. I really appreciate when I talk to someone who knows enough to ask the questions, because more often than not, it's a lot of these integrations are by a small business or medium-sized business, and they want to integrate these things into their system, but they don't have the IT backend, or they have an IT person or people, but they're so stressed out because they're managing like 100, 300 sites. Like if you've ever met an IT team for a school district, often it's a team of like 3 to 5 people who maintain 120 schools.
Right.
And
right.
Like, that's insane. Like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's
for
crazy.
You. So they appreciate it because I like front end the discussion. I'm like, okay, I want to talk to your IT person, but more often than not, I think that conversation just doesn't happen until, like you said, till something happens.
Yeah, and I mean, and security too. It's it's one thing to talk about, and people should do this, should do that. At the end of the day, though, it is a cost, and that cost is coming from somewhere. I mean, whether that's hiring more talent for a team, whether that's investing in a solution that has invested in these security checks, meaning they had to pay a real team. I mean, it's a real dollar exchange and investment at some point. And one thing we, really try to communicate, especially with some of our prospective larger deployments, is, hey, listen, like, yes, there is a cost to security, but it's not optional to pay it. It's just a matter of when you pay it. So are you going to pay it on the front end, or are you going to pay it in the back end? And it's definitely a conversation we have to have. But I think once people kind of wrap their head around that, the clear choice is, hey, you want to pay for that at the front end where you're in control and not somebody else.
That's kudos to Viktor again for the little. I love this idea because even when I bring up these devices, like one of my friends asked what this was for because we were at an airport and I plugged it into the port at the airport before I plugged in, my I think it was my Switch or something for like just gaming, and he's like, "What's that?" I'm like, I don't trust anything. I didn't build or I didn't put in myself. So I'm like, this makes sure that it's just power. And so we got into discussion on it. I'm like, well, he's like, how do you know it's whatever? I'm like, look, you plug into the computer and plug in your device. Does the computer now recognize the device or not? If it recognizes a device other than this, then this isn't really what you think it is.
Right.
And it opens, like, why I like this is because it opens that discussion. And it's more often than not, I find there are customers who don't even want to have the discussion. They're like, oh, we're not worried about that. That's not a problem, whatever. And it's like, it's a problem it's not a problem until it becomes one. And
Right.
we just want to make sure that you're secured. So here's a few things that you should be asking anybody you talk to. You know.
And I think the other thing to add to that is that people need to come from the mindset that it's a one bang cost to like there is a life cycle cost to this, because there is a cost for the vendor or to provide you security updates and software updates, right? And that needs to be paid one way or another, right? It's kind of somewhat of a solved problem in the world of SaaS, but I would imagine in the LED world, it's far. You're coming from a slightly vantage point where like you're buying boxes from box pushers, and that's the end of the customer exchange. That's the end of the exchange is like, oh, well, you received your box. Our contract is over, essentially, right? How you mentioned that there is more more cloud-based things going on there in terms of firmware updates, life cycles, SLAs, all that jazz. What has your experience been so far with that? Like, is there a shift happening in that industry, or is it still very much like a one-off transaction? Like, oh, you received your LED screen and your firmware, thank you and goodbye.
I think it depends on the company. You know, like a lot of companies will, like everybody offers lifetime support, right?
Right.
But once the system's up, they're like, well, unless someone calls us, then it's not a problem, right? Yeah. And that brings up the question of like, well, how much active monitoring do you do? And even like you're saying with SaaS, in the SaaS world, it's not an issue, but it kind of is, right? Because Windows 10 expired. It just expired.
Yes.
But so we got when the last Windows kernel, the operating system, whatever, expired, a lot of companies were like, well, you guys are still running this. This is going to be a problem. I'm like, no. Okay. So your Windows expired, but we're enterprise. So we actually pay for support for another year or two, specifically because when something hits end of life, we want to have that flexibility for you. So security wise, you're okay. You're taken care of. But this is a good time for us to have that conversation about upgrades, right? About changing out your player, about maybe even at that point for most out of home, you've got a life expectancy of about a decade, which this is going to be a problem at some point because
that's a lot for software. That's a long time.
Yeah. So that's the question is like, okay, well, who brings up that thing, right? And even on our side, in the Vantage end, when systems went from 4G to 5G, right, on cellular, we had a lot of conversations suddenly with clients because we're like, hey, your system's not going to be supported anymore because you're running cellular. So we're gonna do this for you. We're gonna upgrade you to the 5G, and understand that should be good for a decade. But if you have other stuff, this is a good time for you to bring this up with your clients. And it's interesting because we're often initiating that conversation with the client. And they're like, well, no one else has mentioned this. I'm like, it's a good time for you to talk to whoever you bring in for IT, because this is a security issue that's broader. I was like, do you have any like Microsoft-based computers in your office? They're like, yeah, what do we do? I'm like, okay, there's some options. And it has nothing to do with us. But again, it's because we're concerned about the client's security that we go that little extra mile and we make some quiet recommendations. We're not saying this. I'm not saying this is what you need to do, but I'm saying the best thing that you could do is ask the person who's responsible for this. Because we're just covering our part, but I know this is going to be broader.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it last time we spoke was like I went to an industry event earlier this year, and a fairly well-known vendor announced a new Signage TVs. I did some poking, and it's shipping with Android 12, which is at the day of the announcement was already end of life, right? And most buyers would not even think about that. Unfortunately, they just like, well, it's functioning, it's working. Right, but yeah, like I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with these like talking points in the industry, which is what the question we were catching up. Like people are actually resonating. Like there are other companies out there that are asking these questions as well, right? So,
well, guys, we're getting to the end of the hour here, and one thing we like to end on is a little look towards the future. So maybe Deacon, you can end with a point or two. I mean, you're on the frontier of a lot of this stuff, especially from your advising and consulting roles. What are some of the, projects, innovations, maybe industry theme changes on your mind for the next 5 years out?
I definitely see. It's the buzz, right? Is the AI, not AGI or ASI, not the hyper intelligence, but I mean that's one element. But I've got a keynote actually in Arkansas next month. It's very short, and it's interesting because I'm talking about this changes in technology and how it affects like urban growth, right? For city planners and such, and the keynote is actually tentatively titled "The Future Was Yesterday," because a lot of the technology, people constantly think about technology as what's the next thing to come, right? Or what's the progressive growth of the current stuff. And the reality is we don't think about all of these technical elements that we have right now that are available. We just haven't figured out new ways to apply them. And AI in that way it's in its infancy, in that it's that it's not even the people developing the systems, the back-end support, who are finding the applications. It's people playing with it who are like, hey, look what I just figured out how to do, right? And we even think of Bluetooth and cellular technology. And in a lot of my seminars that I would give, I'd ask people, when do they think cell phones were first used? And I would go like 2000, 1990, 1980, and I'd have people hold their hands up until like drop it when you think. When I get to the 60s, everyone will drop it. I'm like, no, it was the 50s and the 40s. Like cell phone technology was the actual cellular technology. They had these phones that were coming out of World War II, the 40s, right? And they had the radios that used transmission. And someone at Bell Labs was like, hey, we could put this in a car because it's a battery and stuff, and it just identifies itself uniquely. And then they realized, well, we have a problem when they have multiple people on the same tower. So let's do this. Let's create a lot of different towers that carry the signal as it moves, and then it pulls it from this tower to that tower, and we'll call these cells that the stuff will go on. So basically now they have a cellular phone, a phone that works on a cell system. And it's like, so the first cellular phones were in the 40s, which is mind-blowing. So
definitely.
It's less about the technology we have that's going to come and more about the applications of what we have now and how we can be more innovative with that. I think it's often overlooked.
Super interesting. And we'll link up your socials in the show notes. Is there any, what's the best way for people to find you and see what you're up to and see where they can learn more from some of these keynotes?
No, a lot of the stuff, just hit me up on LinkedIn, I think is the easiest way, right?
Nice.
Or just drop me a line, Deacon at vantageled.com. And I'm always pretty accessible, and I like meeting new people because it fires up new stuff for me, regardless of what their background is. And I appreciate this opportunity to meet with you guys. So.
Yeah, it was super fun. Always great talking shop, and looking forward to the next time. So
good stuff. Thanks so much, Deacon.
All right, thanks guys. We'll wrap up. See everyone on the next Changelog episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Have a good evening.
Bye.